a 70s style period horror thriller with wine. Let's talk about Wineville. Cheers. Hey everyone, it's David Stark from Watcher Pass, and we're going to talk to you about Wineville, which comes to VOD on September 6, 2024. It is a new 70s horror thriller that is directed and starring Brande Roderick. And my hot take is, I think you should watch it later. I was kind of between a watch later and a pass, but I think overall, I enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed a lot of the aesthetics about it. I really think it's kind of got a nice period aesthetic. It has a great use of practical effects and some messed up family situations. Makes for a pretty interesting and fun horror experience. It's not great, but I like what it was going for, and I like kind of the commitment to the things that make horror great. So, all that being said, I'm going to tell you a little about the film, a few things I like, a few things I didn't like, and then really quickly go into the ending. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers in the ending section. If you don't want to know what happens in this movie, and you might not there, or some surprise along the way, I would turn it off when I get to the ending. Before that, though, I'll keep it vague. I'll keep it spoiler-free. Let you know when I get to the spoilers. So in Wineville, you have Tess and her son, Walter. They are driving back to Tess's family home in Wineville, California, which I guess is the old name of a new city in Southern California. But she is driving back to Wineville because her father has finally passed away. She left home when she was young because of some messed up things. Now she's coming back to deal with her father's estate. But when she gets there, there's a lot more going on and a lot more danger than I think she expected. So things I liked about this episode. The first, I love the practical effects. It is a old school horror movie, and they went really hard on the practical effects, and I love it. It looks good, it looks gross, it looks gory. And I really love the commitment to that in a horror movie. I talked to the director, Brande Roderick, director and star, and she said that she was talking to people, and they said, look, if you're going to make a horror movie, go on practical effects, because that's what people want. I completely agree. So, second thing I love the setting. It's set on like an old winery. It looks nice. It looks kind of like picturesque, but there is enough old rusty machinery that it definitely makes it kind of an unsettling place. It makes it you have plenty of shadows, plenty of secret nooks and things like that. Everything you want in like an old school horror movie. And the last thing I love the kind of like period aesthetics. They decided to make this a 70s film, and it shows. It's got some like 70s style writing. It has 70s style clothes, cars, things like that. It feels like it's out of a different time, and it gives it kind of a unique, interesting look to it that I enjoyed. I thought it looked nice, and it makes this film kind of stand out from others. So, all that being said, things I didn't love as much. The first, it's a little strange. I mean, it's kind of related. The first and the second are kind of the same thing. There is some weird family situation stuff, some family dynamic stuff that I don't know if it's necessary. It makes some of the messed up things make sense, but it feels almost like it was put in there for shock value. Maybe it was. I don't know. I mean, some of the things are important. Some of the things are important to explain Tess's character and whatnot, but it feels like they just kind of stacked on stacked on stacked the various messed up family dynamics, and it's memorable and it definitely shocks, but I don't really know if it was necessary. So, and the second thing I didn't love as much, there was some rough delivery. Not much. I mean, it was enjoyable enough, but there was definitely some rough delivery in here. But again, it's a 70s style movie, so maybe that is by design. Maybe they wanted that because that is kind of like makes it feel more authentic. I don't know. But all that being said, Wineville comes to digital and on demand on September 6, 2024. Like I said, I think you should check it out later. Maybe wait for it to come to streaming, or if the price is right on demand, rent it, enjoy it. It is at least a fun horror experience. Definitely has some nice things going for it. So if you do see it, let me know what you think. Let me know what you like and didn't like. I would love to hear it. So I'm gonna really quickly go into a recap and the ending right now. So if you don't know what happens in this movie, I would turn it off now because there'll be spoilers. So Wineville starts with this like attractive man working on his car. Seems like his car is broke down, and some girl swings by to pick him up. She stops to say hi. She stops asks if he needs a ride. He says he does. They end up going to a nearby place. They're making out, and she asks if they have anywhere more private they can go. Well, unfortunately for her, they did. She wakes up. She's like on a wooden cross, essentially like a wooden X thing, tied up. She is gagged. She is like crying for help. She doesn't want, she wants to be let go, but we don't see who does this. We don't hear anything else, but this person takes these like shears, these garden shears, and stabs her in the stomach, and then like basically pulls out her intestines and essentially eviscerates her. Not good for her, and not good for probably that nice person that she picked up. Seems like maybe he's got a little bit more going on. So now we switch to Tess. Tess is driving to Wineville with her son. They're going to go sell the estate of her father. She hates her father. She never wanted to come back, but now he's dead, and she is his only heir, so she has to. Now, they end up getting there, and the father's house is the same as it was. And Tess's aunt also lives on the property. She doesn't live in the house, she lives in like a separate place. And so Tess's aunt is there. It seems like her and her aunt have like a pretty cool relationship. And there's also someone else on this farm, this person named Joe, the attractive person that got picked up earlier. That's Joe. He's kind of like a surrogate son to the father. It seems like he was abandoned there when he was young, and her father, Edmund, and Tess's aunt, Anne, raised her. Now, when Tess gets to her father's house, it seems like some of the memories that she has tried not to think about for a while come flooding back. And it seems like she was probably assaulted at the house. We don't get a ton of information now, but we see that when she gets to her bed, she lays on the bed and looks up, and there's a stain on the ceiling. And that seems to bring back a memory of some horrible thing that happened. And she probably focused on that stain to make sure she didn't experience whatever else was happening. Now, we also find out that she doesn't really want to run this estate. She doesn't want to run this winery. Apparently, this is a winery that's been in her family for a long time. She has no interest in running it. She just wants to sell the land and get out of there, which upsets her aunt because her aunt lives on that land. And if she sells the winery, her aunt doesn't have a place to live. And so is Joe. Joe lives in a camper on the winery as well. So it seems like both her aunt and somewhat brother, step-ish brother, adopted brother would be kind of like thrown out. So eventually, Tess goes looking for Joe, and when she opens a barn, another memory floods back. Seems like her mom committed suicide in this farm. So not a lot of very happy memories from this homecoming. We'll see what happens with all of that. Now, eventually, she gets the keys to the place. She's going to look around. She gets the books to see how the farm is doing. And the sheriff comes by and asks if, says that there's another missing person, and asks if people had seen this like attractive girl. Ask everyone. Joe denies seeing her, but we know he has. So it seems like there is something going on here. Now, Tess seems to know the sheriff. Seems that they went to high school together, or seems that they grew up at least together and went to high school together. And it seems like he's super sweet to her. Seems like maybe there's a potential relationship here. I don't know. We'll find out. Now, while Tess is running the books, while Tess is talking to the sheriff, Joe takes Walter and shows him around the farm, shows him some of the jobs that he's doing. And one of the things that he's doing is like trimming the mold and the rot on the fields to make sure that the vines are okay. And Walter is helping, but then he helps and does something, innocuous. He snips a moldy leaf and throws it on the ground. And Joe snaps at him, tells him, never do that. That's going to ruin the vines. You're going to destroy the vines. He calms himself, but it seems like maybe Edmund, who taught Joe everything he knew, was not the nicest teacher. Seems like maybe Edmund was very strict and mean, and that has rubbed off a little bit on Joe. Joe catches himself, he apologizes, but it seems like there is a lot more going on here. Now, after Joe shows Walter some of the things about the farm, he's showering off, and some tourists stop by for a wine tasting. They don't have official wine tastings here, but it seems like they want to taste a lot more than just the wine, and one of them decides to stay and get a personal tour from Joe. Now, Joe gives him a personal tour, and they end up in like a wine cellar, and that is where they start hooking up. And while they're hooking up, we see some visions of Joe's childhood. It seems like he and Aunt Anne would watch movies, and one time they watched a movie that had like a naked woman in it. And there's a very weird scene here where like Anne is like, oh, what's going on? Like, looks like you're enjoying this. And then she just ends up jerking off Joe, young Joe, little Joe. Not good. She does that, and then she makes fun of him for, I guess, coming too fast. So it seems like there's a weird family dynamic here. It seems like Joe and the aunt have at least some intimate moments. I don't know how many more, but this is definitely one that they show. And it seems like Joe has a very complicated childhood. Now, this doesn't work out well for our friend who is getting a tour of the winery, because as they are making out, as that person starts to then become a little bit more intimate with Joe, Joe gets mad at him and starts beating him up. And he basically like beats the snot out of him. And after that person's knocked out, Joe rushes out, just right outside, covered in blood. Like, I feel like he should at least clean up a little bit. He doesn't. He just runs outside. I guess no one saw him, but he then gets the person that he's always cleaned up for him, I guess. And Anne comes in, and she ends up dealing with it. She gets into like her killing clothes, takes this tourist, ties him up, kills him in a very gruesome way. She uses the shears to hurt a very important part of this man. That ends up killing him. And it seems like maybe Anne is the one who is doing the killing. Joe is the one who like is sexually curious, but then when he does he maybe like is taught that that was bad, and so he gets mad at himself or gets mad at the person and ends up beating them up, and then Anne is the one that goes and kills them. Very weird situation. Now, after Anne kills him, she tells Joe to deal with the body, and so Joe does. He cuts the body up, puts it in a wheelbarrow, throws it, goes to like some sort of like grape separator or something, some sort of farm machinery, throws the body parts in there, and it grinds them up and like spits out the blood into the wheelbarrow. Seems like a very messy process. It seems like perhaps this would leave some residue, some smell, something. It doesn't, I guess. I guess he's able to get rid of it, and then eventually he takes that blood and that gore and like dumps it in like a reservoir or the water or something. Maybe it makes the vines grow really well. I don't know. So that night, the sheriff decides to come over for dinner. And when they're talking, he and Tess are talking, and Tess explains why she left. Basically, her dad didn't touch her mom after their wedding night. He eventually started assaulting Tess when she hit puberty. And eventually, she got pregnant from the abuse. And while she was pregnant, I guess her mom maybe tried to stop this, but wasn't able to, and either was so guilty or maybe Anne did this. I'm not sure, but eventually Tess was looking for her mom and found her hanging in the barn. So she was pregnant. She eventually gave birth to this child, but apparently it was stillborn. But as soon as she could walk, she left this nightmare and never looked back. Also, it seems like from this flashback, maybe Edmund and Anne were intimate as well. I'm not certain. It seemed like there was at least some mention here of like Edmund not being interested in Anne. It seems like this whole family had like sexual problems. So after this, after the sheriff leaves, Joe comes to get Tess and says he wants to show her something. And when he goes to show her something, he shows her this like old thing of wine that he has been working on for a long time. He gives her some of the wine from it, and then he gives her something else. They start hooking up as well. Joe says that he wants to open his own winery, and Tess agrees. He's really talented. He should probably do it. But as they are hooking up, Walter comes to see Joe, and he sees, Joe and Tess hooking up, and he runs away. Now, Tess runs out, says that, she's sorry. She wants to go apologize to Walter, and so she runs to Walter. Joe, again, not really being able to deal with his sexual frustration and seeming to get angry every time this happens, in a fit of rage, destroys the wine barrel he's been working on for years, and then gets really upset. A bunch of wine spills out. Don't worry. I talked to Brande Roderick. It was not real wine. It was special effects. They probably used like grape juice or something. I'm not sure, but they didn't destroy real wine. All that was saved. Now, later the next day, Anne brings over chili. I guess she missed their dinner party the night before, and so Anne brings over chili. Now Tess and Walter are eating the chili, and eventually Walter and Tess pass out. Seems like the chili was drugged. Seems like Anne has another diabolical scheme, and she ends up tying up Tess in the barn where her mom killed herself with a rope around her neck on a stool, and basically threatens her. She says, if you don't sign this, I'm going to kick the stool out. So basically forces Tess to sign a document saying that she's going to hand over the farm to Anne and Joe. Now, the sheriff comes back to explore the vineyard because the friends who were wine tasting and one of their friends left and never came back call the sheriff like, hey, what's going on? Like, where is our friend? And he's like, we haven't heard anything. They didn't see her. Are you sure it was the winery? Are you sure it was this winery? They're like, how many wineries have super hot people named Joe on them? He's like, probably not that many. All right, I'll get back to you. And so the sheriff comes and tries to investigate some more. He ends up hearing something and finds Walter passed out. So he ends up saving Walter. But while he's doing this, Joe comes and attacks the sheriff. They get in a fight. It's a really bloody fight. They get stabbed. The sheriff stabs Joe with a screwdriver. He gouges out Joe's eyes a little bit. But eventually, Joe grabs a pitchfork and stabs the sheriff as the sheriff is about to get his gun. So Joe kills the sheriff. I don't know why. I mean, I guess maybe he probably didn't want to be discovered, but the sheriff was just saving Walter, and I don't really know why. I mean, maybe if the sheriff finds everything, Anne will be implicated and Joe is protecting Anne. Joe seemed like a nice person, except for the whole like assaulting people and beating people to a bloody pulp. But he seemed like at his core a nice person. So it was weird that he would then kill the sheriff. But he does. He kills the sheriff, but Walter is able to escape. Now, over on Tess's side, Tess is being forced to sign that, but Anne takes her a long time. She doesn't make her sign really quickly. She's like talking to her, tells her another story. We find out that Joe is actually Tess's kid. So in the weird family dynamics, there's another one. Now, Tess has made out with her son, unknowingly, but her son, who is also, I guess, technically her brother because of the way that he was conceived. So we find this out. We find out that Joe was actually Tess's son and was supposed to kill Joe, supposed to like make it all go away. She couldn't. She couldn't kill the baby. She can kill everyone else, but she can't kill the baby. And then she brought it back and they raised Joe as her own after Tess left. Now, eventually, as Tess is hanging and Anne is like talking to her more for some reason rather than getting her to sign, Walter comes in and is able to untie Tess. Now, Walter is seen. Anne slaps him, I think, or smacks him or something. But Tess is able to attack Anne and eventually kills her, pummeling her face with a rock, just like turn it into hamburger. Now, while this is happening, after this happens, after Anne is dead, Joe comes in and he is upset because his aunt slash maybe lover is dead. So he tackles Tess and starts strangling her. Now, it doesn't look good for Tess. Joe is very strong and he has the jump on her, but Joe doesn't see Walter. Walter grabs that grape knife, that knife that they use to prune the vines, which Joe said was very sharp. Well, now we see it is very sharp because Walter cuts Joe's throat. Joe bleeds out and he collapses, and everyone is safe. Well, no one is safe, but Walter and Tess are safe. So they are the survivors. They're the only two that survive. And now they have a lot more paperwork if they want to sell this farm. They're going to have to disclose some things. They're going to have to clean up. They're probably going to have to find a new sheriff to help. It's just going to be a bigger ordeal. But they're not going to have any opposition. So it'll be, it'll be easier in some ways, harder in others. But we don't know what's going to happen because that is the end of the movie. That is Wineville. Like I said, I think you should watch later. Wait for it to come to streaming or on demand if the price is right. It's enjoyable. It's fun. It feels like a throwback horror movie. So if you like classic horror, if you like gore, then you'll probably enjoy this movie. So all that being said, if you do check it out, let me know what you think. Let me know what you like and didn't like. I would love to hear it. And thanks so much for watching. If you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Cheers. Very Gatorade-y.